Hey everyone, welcome to a deep dive, and this time it's a special one. We're going all the way back to 2022. It's Nicolas Cage Reddit AMA.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Reddit AMAs, Ask Me Anything.
Right. Yeah, I know what those are.
Well, this one is pure gold. This is Nicolas Cage we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean,
But
he's iconic, right?
the legend.
Yeah.
Who, delivers every line like it's Shakespeare on Mars.
I know.
And he held nothing back. He was funny. He was philosophical. He was sometimes just bizarre. It's amazing.
I bet.
So yeah, get ready for some serious insights into the mind of, one of Hollywood's most just enigmatic figures.
Yeah, and I think what's so fascinating about him is that, we see him as this larger-than-life personality, almost a caricature at times. But then you get these glimpses of real vulnerability and genuine, artistic passion. It makes you realize there's, so much more depth to him than just the memes.
The memes are legendary, though, right?
Well, they are.
Incredible.
You can't deny the power of...
the Nicolas Cage memes.
Yeah.
But speaking of depth, one of the first things he mentions is his love for independently spirited dramas. You know, the kind that studios are too chicken to touch.
Oh, interesting.
What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, it really speaks to his artistic philosophy, right?
Uh-huh.
He's not chasing box office hits. He's looking for roles that challenge him, that allow him to explore, those darker corners of the human experience. Yeah. And, like Rampart, the film he recommends. It's a perfect example. It's raw. It's gritty. Deals with themes of corruption and moral ambiguity.
Right, not your typical Hollywood fare.
Yeah, exactly.
So we've got this kind of a draw to the darker storytelling, which makes sense when you look at some of his roles, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But then he throws us a curveball. He starts talking about insects.
Oh,
he loves insects. He even talks about discussing praying mantises versus dragonfly larvae with David Cronenberg.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, how often do you hear Nicolas Cage talking about, insect battles?
I mean, that is unexpected. But it's also kind of endearing in a way, right?
Yeah.
It shows he's got this genuine curiosity about the world around him, even the parts that seem really mundane to most of us. And the fact that he's discussing this with Cronenberg.
Right.
Another filmmaker known for, exploring the darker, more visceral aspects of life. It just adds another layer to the image we have of Cage. He's not just an actor.
Yeah.
He's an artist. He's a thinker. He's someone who finds beauty and fascination in the most unexpected places.
Right, he's constantly challenging our perceptions of him.
Exactly.
And speaking of perceptions, there's a question in the AMA about his weird but extremely dedicated fandom.
Right.
And his response is so good. He says, I think any kind of enthusiasm is always welcome and not to be taken for granted.
Oh, wow.
It's so gracious and so humble, considering some of the...
Especially for
unique ways his fans express their admiration.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
So he's not just tolerating his fans. He's genuinely appreciative of them. No matter how they engage with his work, it really makes you wonder, how many A-list actors would respond that way?
Yeah, you're right. It speaks to a level of self-awareness.
Yeah.
And humility. That's pretty rare in Hollywood.
But I think you're right. But then just when you think you've got him figured out, he throws this story at us about going to a San Francisco restaurant twice with Charlie Sheen.
Wow.
To eat square-tubed pasta.
They
went 2 nights in a row.
I have no words.
They loved it so much.
Wow, that's amazing.
Just that image of Nicolas Cage and Charlie Sheen on this culinary quest for square-tube pasta.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's fantastic.
And it reminds you that even celebrities have these little quirks.
Yeah.
And cravings. It humanizes them in a way that, all the awards and the accolades just can't.
Yeah, I agree.
Totally. So we've got this, he's not afraid to be himself.
Yeah.
Even if it means indulging in some strange pasta adventures. But let's get back to his artistic side. When asked about directors he'd love to work with, he drops some names. Christopher Nolan, Ari Aster, Robert Eggers, Spike Lee.
Wow.
What do you think? Is he just name-dropping? Or is there some real potential for collaborations here?
I mean, I don't think he's just name-dropping. I mean, think about the possibilities. Cage's intensity in a Nolan Mindbender.
I know.
His kind of offbeat energy in an Eggers historical epic. Yeah. His vulnerability in a Spike Lee joint. Each of these directors brings a unique style.
Right.
And Cage's range is so vast. I can't help but think that there's some, like, series cinematic magic waiting to happen.
I'm picturing these films in my head. They're masterpieces. But then he reveals the 2 films he can watch over and over. Apocalypse Now and Spirited Away.
Wow.
Diverse choices, right?
Very eclectic.
What do you think?
Well, it makes perfect sense to me. You've got Apocalypse Now. Yeah. This war epic that delves into the madness of war, and then Spirited Away, the whimsical animated adventure that explores these themes of identity and courage. It tells me that he's not just a performer. He's a true cinephile, someone who really appreciates artistry in all forms.
And it's not just what he watches, it's how he watches. Remember when he talks about filming massive talent in Dubrovnik during the pandemic?
Oh, right, yeah.
He was never actually able to experience the city.
Oh, wow.
Because of lockdown restrictions. It's just this stark reminder that even Hollywood stars aren't immune to real-world events.
Yeah, they might live these glamorous lives.
Right.
But at the end of the day, they're still human beings, navigating the same challenges we all face.
Right.
Makes you think, like, how did that isolation affect his performance? Did it feed into that kind of meta nature of playing himself in that film? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Something to think about.
So many layers. But let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about Pedro Pascal. He tells this hilarious story about Pascal's sense of humor, specifically this incident with a cabbage.
Oh, yeah, the cabbage. What happened with the cabbage?
I don't even know. He's telling this story with this playful bewilderment. He couldn't figure out if Pascal was genuinely confused or just messing with him.
I love that.
It's just this perfect mix of humor and self-deprecation. Makes him so relatable, you know?
Totally.
Even Nicolas Cage gets confused by Pedro Pascal's antics. That's what makes it funny.
Exactly.
He's not putting himself above anyone, not even his co-stars.
Right.
But then we get a peek behind the curtain a little bit when he talks about Face Off.
Oh, yeah?
He and Travolta studied each other's dailies to capture each other's mannerisms.
Wow.
What kind of insights does that give you into their approach to acting?
Well, it just highlights the dedication they both brought to that film. I mean, they weren't just playing characters. They were inhabiting each other's acting styles. And, I mean, Face Off is already such a visually and thematically over-the-top film. To hear that they put that level of detail into their performance just adds a whole new level of appreciation.
Makes you want to go back and rewatch it.
Yeah.
And look for those little nuances. It's like
Totally.
a behind-the-scenes glimpse into the making of a masterpiece.
Exactly.
So we think we're starting to understand his process, and then he says his dream role is Captain Nemo of all the characters.
Why Nemo?
He says he loves the ocean.
Oh, okay.
He's drawn to Nemo's deep love for the ocean.
I can see that.
Which Cage clearly shares.
Yeah.
He's talked about his fascination with marine life before.
Oh, yeah?
He's even compared his acting style to a cephalopod.
Really?
Yeah, constantly changing and adapting.
Interesting.
So it makes sense that he'd be drawn to a character who embodies that.
Yeah.
That connection to the natural world.
I can see that.
It's not just about the role.
Yeah.
It's about the themes that it represents.
Yeah.
He's searching for roles that align with his own personal interests.
Interesting.
It's a level of intentionality you don't always see in Hollywood.
Yeah, you're right.
And then he brings up Lord of War, which he believes had a pretty significant impact. He even thinks it influenced films like The Wolf of Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see the parallels?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Both films really delve into that world of greed and excess, featuring these morally ambiguous characters, operating in these morally gray areas.
Yeah, yeah.
And you could say that Lord of War, with its look at the international arms trade, kind of paved the way for these explorations of unchecked capitalism in other industries.
It's fascinating to think about the ripple effect of a film, but let's get a little bit more personal. He was asked to choose 3 of his films for preservation. Oh. Which is a hard question. Yeah. Someone with such a long career. But his choices were Bringing Out the Dead, Pig, and Leaving Las Vegas.
Oh, wow.
What do you think about those selections?
I think it's like he's giving us a mini retrospective of his career, highlighting these films that represent different phases. You know, you got Bringing Out the Dead, showcases his ability to play characters grappling with intense emotional turmoil, a thing that you see throughout his work. And then Pig, which he considers his best performance, represents his shift toward these quieter, more introspective roles. And then Leaving Las Vegas, of course, the film that earned him an Oscar, really solidified his reputation as like a dramatic powerhouse.
Yeah, it's like a roadmap
Yeah,
to understanding Nicolas Cage as an artist.
exactly.
And the question everyone wanted to know, what's his least favorite movie quote that people yell at him?
I want to know.
His response. I don't have a problem with any of the quotes. I'm glad they remember the movie.
Oh, wow.
So good.
That's amazing.
Talk about taking the high road.
Right.
It's another example of his humility. His appreciation for his fans. He's not letting his ego get in the way. He's just grateful that people are engaging with his work.
Yeah.
Even if it means, shouting movie quotes at him.
Yeah.
It's refreshing to see an actor who can laugh at himself.
Totally.
Appreciate the way his work has become part of the culture.
Right.
It's not all about movies, though, right?
Right.
He talks about his hobbies, too. Reading, watching cinema, and exercise.
Pretty standard stuff.
Pretty standard.
Yeah.
But what does that tell us about him?
I think it reveals his dedication to his craft.
Yeah.
Even in his leisure time. He's constantly learning, observing, staying physically active.
Yeah.
All things that inform his work as an actor. It's not just a job. It's a lifestyle.
Yeah, he's constantly absorbing information, experiences, adding to his repertoire as an artist.
Yeah.
Then we get into some deep cuts. When he's asked about his favorite characters in literature and film, he admits it's a tough question. But he does mention James Dean's performance in East of Eden as Cal, and Dmitry Karamazov from The Brothers Karamazov.
Wow.
Really interesting choices, right?
Yeah.
What do you think those choices tell us?
Well, I mean, both of those characters are so complex. They're flawed. They're deeply emotional. I mean, James Dean, this icon of youthful rebellion, and then Dmitry Karamazov, this literary character, wrestling with all these moral dilemmas. It's clear that Cage is drawn to characters with depth, internal conflict, and a certain intensity.
Right.
And, I'm not surprised he loves classic literature.
Yeah, it makes sense.
It speaks to his intellectual curiosity, his commitment to bringing a certain, literary weight to his roles.
Yeah, it's like he's approaching his craft with this, same level of depth and analysis that you'd find in a literature class.
Right.
He's not just, reciting lines. He's embodying the spirit of these characters.
Yeah.
And then we get this story about how he spent his bond money on a lavish prom night, comparing himself to Dmitry Karamazov. He rented a limousine, bought a tuxedo, enjoyed a 4-course meal at a fancy restaurant, all for the prom.
Wow.
It's such a youthful act, almost reckless, but it also reveals this certain extravagance, a willingness to embrace life's pleasures.
Yeah, I love that. It's pure gold. I mean, and it makes you wonder if that youthful boldness foreshadowed his career choices, his willingness to take risks and embrace the unconventional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that even the most serious artists have this playful, sometimes even reckless side.
Yeah.
And speaking of playful, the snakeskin jacket from Wild at Heart, he gave it to Laura Dern.
Really?
I know. Yeah. It's such a symbol of individuality in that film and personal freedom.
It's a tangible piece of film history, imbued with all these memories from making that film.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that these objects hold sentimental value for actors associated with these significant roles or collaborations. Okay, so let's talk about Big Daddy from Kick-Ass.
Okay.
He credits Adam West's Batman as his sole inspiration.
Interesting.
Which is fascinating, considering the different tones of those projects.
Yeah, for sure.
But he even told Adam West that he was channeling him for the role.
Did he really?
And West said, "I saw you try to channel me."
Oh my gosh.
It's so good.
That's amazing.
It's classic Adam West.
It is.
It's just heartwarming. To see Cage, seasoned actor in his own right, still seeking approval from his hero, it speaks to the power of early influences and how they can shape an artist.
Totally.
Okay, let's talk about a more serious question. He was asked about his performances being turned into memes and gags.
Yeah.
And he makes this interesting distinction between meme as a cultural expression and gag as a potential insult. What do you think he's getting at there?
Well, I think he's acknowledging the complex relationship between an actor's work and how it's interpreted by the audience, right?
Yeah.
He's not dismissing these memes as just mockery, but he's also recognizing that they can be hurtful or disrespectful.
Right.
It's this really nuanced perspective that shows he's willing to engage with the digital age and understand how fan culture is evolving.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even in the age of memes and viral videos, there's still a human being behind the image, you know?
Absolutely.
Someone who can be affected by the way their work is perceived.
Yeah, and it speaks to his ability to kind of see the bigger picture, recognize that his work exists in this larger cultural context that he doesn't always control.
And speaking of things he can't control, for those hoping for another National Treasure film, he says it's unlikely as the franchise has moved to TV.
Oh, really?
I know.
Interesting.
What does this tell us about Hollywood?
Well, it really highlights this growing trend of film franchises moving to television. It's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it allows for more expansive storytelling or character development. But on the other hand, it raises questions about whether that big screen spectacle can be replicated on the small screen.
Yeah, it presents opportunities and challenges for everyone. Okay, so this is amazing. Ethan Hawke praises Cage as the first actor since Marlon Brando to do something new with acting.
Wow.
Such high praise.
That's high praise.
And Cage is so humble in his response. He acknowledges the compliment, but deflects the credit, mentioning silent film stars and performance art like kabuki as his inspirations.
Wow. I mean, that speaks to his deep knowledge of film history and how acting styles has evolved. You know, he's not claiming to reinvent the wheel, but he's building upon the foundation laid by those who came before him.
Yeah.
And that's what makes him so unique. He's drawing from all these different influences, from classic literature to silent film to performance art, and he's creating something entirely his own.
So we've got this constant exploration, pushing the boundaries of his craft, while also honoring the legacy of those who came before him. It's really fascinating.
It is.
And then we get to his love for a specific period in history, the 1950s in the United States.
Interesting.
What do you think draws him to that era?
Well, he mentions the music, the cars, the rise of these iconic figures, like Elvis Presley, James Dean, Marlon Brando. And it kind of suggests this nostalgia for a bygone era of American ingenuity and style.
Right.
A period that continues to inspire him.
Yeah, it's interesting because he specifically mentions the cars.
Yeah.
Which we know is a big interest of his.
Yeah.
And later he even reviews that he owns a 2016 Shelby GT350R.
Oh, wow.
Which is a modern version of his car from Gone in 60 Seconds.
That's amazing.
It's just this little detail that shows he loves all things cool and stylish.
Totally.
But let's not forget his love for silent films.
Oh, yeah.
He mentions all-time greats. Lon Chaney in Phantom of the Opera, Max Schreck in Nosferatu, John Barrymore in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Charlie Chaplin. It just shows his deep knowledge of film history.
Yeah.
He's not just an actor.
Right.
He's a student of film.
Yeah.
Constantly learning from the masters who came before him.
He's absorbing it all.
Okay, so we have this amazing moment where someone addresses a question to Mr. Travolta, asking about life after swapping faces with Nicolas Cage.
Oh my gosh.
Cage's response is perfect. Just, ha! I love that.
It's so good.
That's so good.
It's like
It's perfect.
acknowledging the absurdity of the question without getting bogged down in explanation.
Totally.
He doesn't take himself too seriously.
No.
He can appreciate a good joke,
Right?
even if it's at his own expense.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even amidst these serious discussions of film and acting, there's always room for fun.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get back to Massive Talent.
Yeah.
He reveals that playing Nick Cage was his most challenging role.
Interesting.
It was a meta role, a fictionalized version of himself,
Yeah.
which must have been so complex. Yeah, I mean, it raises these questions.
Yeah.
About the psychological challenges of portraying yourself on screen.
Right.
Blurring the lines between reality and performance.
Right.
It's like holding a mirror up to yourself.
Yeah.
And then trying to analyze the reflection as if it were separate from you.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine.
It must have required so much self-awareness and detachment.
Yeah, and it speaks to his willingness to push himself, explore new territory, even when it means confronting his own persona.
And yet, despite the complexities of Massive Talent, he reiterates his love for Pig and considers it his favorite performance.
Oh, Pig is such a beautiful film. And his performance is just heartbreaking. I mean, he plays a man who's lost everything, retreating from the world, and finds solace in this simple connection to his truffle-hunting pig. And it's in that simplicity, that quiet intensity, that he really shines.
It's a reminder that the most powerful performances can come from stillness, the ability to convey emotion through subtle gestures.
It's a masterclass in restraint and authenticity.
And it's interesting to consider why this performance resonates with him so much.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the themes of loss and grief. Maybe it's the film's quiet intensity.
Yeah.
It's focus on character and emotion.
Right.
Whatever it is. It's clear that Pig holds a special place for him.
For sure.
Okay, let's end on a lighter note. He was asked about his opening chess move.
Oh, yeah. What is it?
He moves the knight forward first.
Interesting.
Now, I don't know much about chess,
Me either.
but even I know that's an unconventional opening.
It is a little risky,
Mm-hmm.
but it could disrupt your opponent's strategy.
Right.
Yeah.
Which, if you think about it, kind of sums up his career.
Yeah, I like that.
He's not afraid to take risks, make
Yeah.
those unconventional choices.
Yeah.
He keeps us guessing,
He does.
and that's what makes him so compelling. But we've got so much more to uncover in this AMA. So let's take a quick break and come back for part 2 of our deep dive into Nicolas Cage. All right, we're back. Ready to dive even deeper into the world of Nicolas Cage. We've learned so much about him already. His artistic philosophy, his love for the strange and unusual, his genuine appreciation for his fans.
Yeah.
What else have we got?
Well, he talks a bit about his approach to acting, specifically his love for research. When he's preparing for a role,
Okay.
he says, I love going down rabbit holes
Right.
and discovering things. That might inform the character.
Yeah.
It makes you realize just how much thought and effort he puts into each performance.
It's not just about memorizing lines. It's about understanding that character's inner world, their
Mhm.
motivations, fears, desires.
All right.
And for Cage, that involves a lot of research.
Yeah.
Exploring every facet of that character's life
Mhm.
and background.
You can see that dedication in his performances, right?
Yeah.
He's not just playing a role, he's embodying it, becoming the character,
Yeah.
which requires a deep level of understanding and empathy.
And that's what makes his performances so compelling, even when the material might be a little out there.
Right.
Speaking of out there, he was asked about his favorite horror movie.
Oh.
And he admits it's a tough choice. But he lands on The Wicker Man, the original, of course.
The original.
Yeah, from 1973.
Oh, yeah,
Now, The Wicker Man is a classic for a reason.
for sure.
It's got that eerie atmosphere, unsettling rituals, that clash between belief systems. It gets under your skin
Yeah,
and stays with you.
it does.
Why do you think that film resonates with him?
Well, I think it speaks to his fascination with the darker side of human nature, the things that we fear, the things that we repress.
Yeah.
I mean, The Wicker Man really explores the dangers of blind faith,
Mm-hmm.
the power of ritual, the primal fear of the unknown.
Right.
All themes that Cage has explored in his work, both directly and indirectly.
It's like he's drawn to stories that challenge our perceptions of reality,
Yeah.
that make us question our beliefs
Exactly.
and assumptions.
He's not afraid to go to those dark places,
Mhm.
both as an actor and as a viewer.
Yeah.
And The Wicker Man is a film
Mm.
that really embraces those dark themes without holding back.
It's interesting to consider how his love for silent films might actually inform his appreciation for horror.
Oh, how so?
Well, silent films relied so heavily on visual storytelling, atmosphere, mood, conveying emotion through gesture and expression.
Right.
All those things are crucial to good horror.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a shared language, a way of tapping into those primal fears
Right.
without relying on words.
And you can see that in his work, his willingness to experiment, to use his face and body to express things, to create these moments of intensity that go beyond dialogue.
It's true.
He was also asked about his favorite silent films.
Okay.
And while he says it's a tough question,
Yeah, I bet.
he does mention a few standouts. Lon Chaney in The Phantom of the Opera, Max Schreck in Nosferatu, John Barrymore in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Wow.
It's a testament to his appreciation for film history. These films really helped to shape cinema. They pushed the boundaries of storytelling at a time when sound was still a novelty.
Yeah.
And you can see that influence in his work.
Yeah.
His willingness to experiment, to embrace the grotesque, to use his face and body as these instruments of expression.
It's a direct lineage from those early pioneers.
Oh, okay. So, we have to talk about this. The question that sent the internet into a frenzy.
Okay.
Someone asked, "Dear Mr. Travolta, how has life changed for you since Changing Faces with Nicolas Cage? Do you regret the decision, or would you do it again?"
Oh, my gosh.
What did you think of his response?
Well, I mean, it was classic Cage. Just,
Perfect.
Perfect.
He could have given a serious answer, but he chose to acknowledge the absurdity of it with a laugh.
I love that.
It's that self-awareness, that ability to poke fun at himself that makes him so endearing.
Right.
He's not afraid to embrace the weirdness, the memes, the fact that he's become this larger-than-life figure.
Yeah.
He's in on the joke, and that makes him even more likable.
Exactly. And it speaks to his confidence as an actor. He's not worried about protecting his image
Mm-hmm.
or controlling how people see him.
Yeah.
He's comfortable with who he is.
Even if who he is John Travolta for half a movie.
Right.
Okay, let's get a little more serious for a second. He talks about his most challenging role, which was playing Nick Cage in Massive Talent.
Yeah.
In this meta role, a fictionalized version of himself. It must have been incredibly complex.
I think it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Because it really forces him to confront his own persona, his public image, the way he's perceived by the world.
Right.
And to do that in a comedic context, to satirize yourself, but also find moments of genuine emotion. It's tough.
It must have been mind-bending to play a character who's both you and not you.
Yeah. To detach yourself from your own identity in such a profound way.
Right. It speaks to his willingness to really push himself.
To explore new territory,
Yeah.
even if it means confronting his own vulnerabilities.
And yet, despite those challenges, he names Pig as his favorite performance.
Oh, Pig. Pig is such a beautiful film.
Yeah.
And his performance is heartbreaking. He plays this man who's lost everything, who's retreated from the world, and finds solace in this connection to his truffle hunting pig. And it's in that simplicity, that quiet intensity, that Cage really shines.
Yeah, it's a reminder that the most powerful performances can come from stillness.
Right.
That ability to convey emotions through subtle gestures.
The masterclass in restraint.
It is.
Authenticity.
And I wonder why this performance resonates with him so much. Maybe it's the exploration of loss and grief.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the focus on character and emotion over plot and spectacle, whatever it is. It's clear that Pig holds a special place for him,
I think so.
representing a real creative triumph.
Yeah.
And speaking of personal connections, let's go back to that chess move.
Oh,
moving the knight forward.
Yeah.
An unconventional opening, risky, but it can disrupt your opponent.
He can.
So I wonder, is that how he approaches his career? Always looking for those unexpected moves, those bold choices.
Yeah, I like that.
It definitely adds another layer to the puzzle that is Nicolas Cage.
It does.
So speaking of unconventional choices, let's talk about his silent performance in Willy's Wonderland.
Oh, yeah.
He chose to be silent the entire film.
Wow.
As an acting experiment, inspired by Harpo Marx.
Oh, wow.
Bold choice.
Yeah, it is.
To rely entirely on physical comedy and expression.
I think it speaks to his desire to push boundaries, to explore new ways of storytelling.
Yeah.
To challenge himself as an actor.
Absolutely.
To convey a character's emotions without dialogue requires such a deep understanding of physicality.
Yeah.
Timing. Nonverbal communication.
He pulls it off.
Hold up.
He brings this manic energy to the role. This mix of intensity and absurdist humor. His character is both terrifying and hilarious.
Yeah.
It really showcases his versatility.
It does.
And his willingness to embrace the unconventional. But what's even more interesting is that he refuses to say what was in his character's drink can.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
He says the audience's interpretation is more important than his own.
I love that.
It's such a brilliant move.
It is.
He's leaving it up to our imagination.
Yeah.
It shows his respect for the audience and reminds us that the most powerful stories are the ones we tell ourselves.
That's true.
Okay. One last question before we move on. Will he ever reprise his role as ghostwriter?
Ooh.
He hints that it's possible. If Marvel has a compelling idea, what do you think?
Well, I mean, it's definitely possible.
Yeah.
His Ghost Rider films have this cult following.
Right.
And he's open to revisiting roles if the context is right.
Right.
It would be interesting to see how he'd approach the character now.
Right.
With all the experience he's gained.
Yeah.
I mean, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is known for embracing unexpected choices.
Right.
A Nicolas Cage Ghost Rider film could be a wild ride.
I would love to see that. But for now, we've got to wrap up part 2. We've covered so much ground. From silent films to chess moves to his thoughts on memes.
Yeah.
It's been a fascinating journey into the mind of Nicolas Cage.
And not done yet, though.
Stay tuned for part 3, where we'll explore his final thoughts on acting, filmmaking, and what it means to be Nicolas Cage. All right, so we're back for the final part of our Nicolas Cage deep dive.
I can't believe how much we've learned about him.
Me neither. We've explored his love of film, his fascination with insects, his surprisingly humble approach to fame. What other gems are hidden in this AMA?
Well, there's this question that gets to the heart of how he views his work. and its relationship to the audience. You know how we were talking about him not having a least favorite movie quote because he was just glad that people remembered the movies.
Yeah, I loved that response.
Well, in this part of the AMA, he kind of expands on that.
Yeah.
He was asked if there's a performance he felt was misunderstood. You know, one that's often turned into a meme or a gag?
Yeah, I'm curious about this. He seems so self-aware, but I can see how it could be frustrating to have your work reduced to a meme.
Well, his response is pretty insightful. He actually talks about the difference between a meme and a gag. He sees a meme as like a symbol of a pop cultural movement.
Right.
Whereas a gag is more like a diss.
Okay.
And he says he doesn't look at anything anymore as a diss. He sees it more as a recognition.
Yeah.
Of some sort of expression.
That's fascinating. So he's not dismissing memes entirely, but he's not letting them define him either. It's like he's choosing to see the positive in it. Yeah. Recognizing that memes can be a form of engagement, even if they're not always super sophisticated.
Yeah. It's a reminder that art can take on a life of its own once it's out there in the world.
Absolutely. And for an actor like Cage, whose work is often so visually striking, it makes sense that it's become this meme-worthy material. And I love that he embraces that. Yeah. He sees it as this cultural dialogue rather than a personal attack.
Yeah, it shows real maturity.
It does.
And an understanding of how art interacts with the digital world.
Yeah, it's like he's not letting ego get in the way of the fact that his work is connecting with people, even in ways he might not have expected.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about his process for a minute. We touched on this earlier. He loves to do research for his roles.
Yeah, he really dives deep.
It's clear that he takes it seriously. He's not just skimming articles online.
No.
He's going deep.
Yeah, he's exploring every little detail that might inform his performance.
It's like he's a detective, piecing together clues to build a complete picture of the character.
Exactly.
And you see that in his performances, the depth, the complexity.
Yeah, he's not just delivering lines. He becomes those characters.
It's amazing.
It is.
Okay, so back to a lighter moment. His opening chess move.
Oh, yeah.
Moving the knight forward.
Yeah.
Unconventional.
Bold.
Risky.
It is.
But it has the potential to disrupt your opponent.
Yeah. It does.
And I can't help but think that's kind of how he approaches his career. Always making these bold choices. Yeah. Going against the grain.
He keeps us guessing.
He does.
That's part of his charm.
And it wouldn't be a Nicolas Cage deep dive without revisiting the question addressed to Mr. Travolta about swapping faces.
Oh, yeah.
Cage's response, haha, is just perfect.
It's so good.
It's like he's acknowledging the absurdity, but with a sense of humor. Right. He doesn't take himself too seriously.
No, he doesn't.
And that's what makes him so relatable.
Yeah, even though he's this huge Hollywood star.
So what have we learned from this deep dive?
Well, I think we've learned that Nicolas Cage is a complex and fascinating individual.
Absolutely.
With a true passion for his craft, a genuine love for his fans, and a willingness to just embrace the absurdity of it all.
He's an artist, a thinker, a meme lord, and a surprisingly down-to-earth guy who just happens to be one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood.
And I think we've all come away with a newfound appreciation for him.
Definitely. If you haven't already read this AMA, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's a must-read for any Cage fan.
It's pure entertainment.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for our deep dive into the mind of Nicolas Cage. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep embracing the weird and wonderful world around you.